Part 1. The Encounter. David Reynolds, a 42-year-old hedge fund manager with a taste for expensive suits and overpriced whiskey, strutted into the first-class cabin like he owned the airline. He was used to people fawning over him, especially when he flashed his platinum card or dropped the names of high-powered friends. So when he saw a man in a plain black hoodie and worn jeans sitting beside him, head down, reading a weathered paperback, he scoffed. "Excuse me, steward," David said loudly, gesturing to the flight attendant. "I think this guy's in the wrong seat. This is first class, not a Greyhound bus." The man looked up slowly. His face was kind, his eyes gentle. "I'm in the right seat," he said softly. David narrowed his eyes. "Do you even know how much this seat costs?" A murmur went through the cabin as a few nearby passengers started to recognize the man in the hoodie. A young woman across the aisle gasped. "Wait, are you—" "Yes," the man smiled modestly. "Keanu Reeves." David blinked. "Wait, what?" Part 2. The Realization. The flight attendant returned, eyes wide. "Mr. Reeves, would you like anything to drink?" David shrank back slightly in his seat. "The Keanu Reeves from John Wick? The Matrix?" Keanu nodded politely. "I try to fly quietly. I enjoy reading on long flights." He went back to his book, The Brothers Karamazov of all things. David turned red. His arrogance melted into embarrassment. "Sorry, man, I just didn't recognize you. I thought you were just some regular guy." Keanu smiled again, not with superiority, but with calm grace. "That's okay. I am a regular guy." Part 3. The Lesson. As the flight went on, David couldn't help but notice how kind Keanu was to the flight attendants. He helped an older woman up with her bag. He offered his extra blanket to a cold teenager. When the flight encountered turbulence, he remained calm, offering comforting words to those panicking. David, meanwhile, was silent, watching, reflecting. When the plane landed and they waited for the doors to open, David turned to Keanu. "You know, I think I learned something today. I came in here thinking money made the man, but I think you just proved the opposite." Keanu stood, slinging a simple backpack over his shoulder. "Kindness is free," he said with a quiet smile, "and often worth more than anything money can buy." He walked off, leaving David standing in awe, humbled not by fame, but by humanity. Part 4. A Change in the Air. Back in the terminal, David Reynolds stood motionless for a moment, watching Keanu blend into the crowd without an entourage, without a fuss. Just a man in his book. Something shifted inside David, like a gear finally clicking into place. The next few days back in Manhattan were strange. The usual pleasure he got from dismissing interns or bragging about his bonus at dinner parties felt hollow. The champagne didn't fizz like it used to, and when his assistant spilled coffee on a report, David didn't yell. Instead, he simply asked, "Are you okay?" She looked at him like he'd grown a second head. Part 5. A Quiet Gesture. A week later, David was at JFK again, heading to a conference in Los Angeles. As he boarded the plane, he carried not a designer briefcase, but a copy of The Brothers Karamazov. He hadn't read a book in years, but somehow, that one felt like the right place to start. In the lounge before the flight, he overheard a young couple talking anxiously about being bumped from their flight and not being able to afford another ticket. Without saying a word, David went to the desk, paid for their seats, and left before they could thank him. No Instagram story, no LinkedIn brag, just a silent act. Part 6. A Chance Meeting. Months passed. David was in LA for a charity fundraiser. As he mingled awkwardly in the garden of a beachfront estate, he spotted a familiar silhouette near the edge of the crowd. Keanu Reeves, same calm presence, holding a glass of water, speaking quietly with a few veterans from a mental health program. David approached, heart beating fast. "Mr. Reeves," he said, "you probably don't remember me." Keanu turned, looked at him for a second, then smiled. "First-class flight, black suit, called me a bus passenger." David laughed nervously. "Yeah, that was me." Keanu raised his glass slightly. You look different. I feel different, David replied. I just wanted to say thanks. Keanu nodded. Good to know something took off after that flight besides the plane. Part 7. The Final Message. Later that night, David stood on a balcony, looking out at the waves. The wind was gentle. He thought of how strange life was, that one small moment, one misjudged stranger, could change the course of a life. That night, he wrote a journal entry that would one day go viral. It turns out sometimes God sends angels in hoodies and jeans, not to punish you, but to remind you who you really are. And somewhere in the world, Keanu Reeves was probably reading another book on another flight, quietly changing lives without ever trying to be anything but himself. Part 8. Ripples of a Moment. David Reynolds didn't go back to being the same man. That encounter became his private turning point, something he never advertised, but carried in his heart like a bookmark. His firm noticed a difference. He started mentoring junior analysts instead of mocking them. He stopped cutting corners even when no one was looking. One evening, he quietly donated $500,000 to a children's literacy program anonymously. The irony wasn't lost on him. Keanu Reeves had made him believe in humanity again, not through a lecture, but through dignity. Part 9. Keanu's Perspective. On the other side of the country, Keanu didn't even remember David's name, not because he didn't care, but because that moment wasn't about him. In an interview with a small podcast months later, he was asked, "Do people ever treat you badly because they don't recognize you right away?" Keanu smiled. "Sometimes, but I don't take it personally. Everyone's fighting their own invisible war. If I can respond with kindness, maybe I help them win one small battle." Part 10. Full Circle. A year later, fate stirred again. David had been invited to speak at a leadership summit in Vancouver, something he never would have accepted before. But this time he accepted because the panel was about character, not success. As he prepared backstage, sipping water and reading from his old marked-up copy of The Brothers Karamazov, the event coordinator rushed in. "There's been a last-minute change. You're going to share the stage with Keanu Reeves. He's doing a surprise fireside chat." David's heart stopped. Part 11. On stage together. The lights dimmed. Cameras rolled. 2 chairs. 1 modest stage. David sat across from Keanu, this time as equals. The host smiled. "Both of you have unique stories. Mr. Reynolds, you once wrote that someone in a hoodie on a flight changed your life. Could you tell us more?" The audience leaned in. David looked at Keanu, who raised his eyebrows in calm amusement. David laughed. "It was him. I was the arrogant guy who thought money was everything. Then I insulted Keanu Reeves because he didn't look like a billionaire." Laughter filled the room. David continued more seriously now. "He could have embarrassed me, put me in my place, but instead, he showed me what real character looks like." Keanu nodded. "We all get moments like that, where we get to decide who we are, not with words, but with actions." Part 12. Legacy. That panel became one of the most viewed clips on leadership in the past decade. Not because it was glamorous, but because it was real. David continued to grow. He funded public libraries, started reading groups in schools, and every time someone asked him why, he smiled and said, "It started with a flight." And Keanu? He went on being Keanu. No press release, no tweet, just another quiet ripple in the pond of humanity.